Sometimes the most complicated situations start with the simplest requests. I should have known better when my best friend Rachel looked at me with that particular sparkle in her hazel eyes, the one that meant she was about to ask for something that would turn my world upside down. We were sitting in our favorite corner booth at the little diner on Madison Street, the one where we'd been meeting every Tuesday for the past 3 years, ever since we both started working downtown. The late afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, casting everything in that golden light that makes even the most ordinary moments feel significant. Rachel leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee cup, and said those words that would change everything. You know how much you love spending time with kids, right? Maybe you could help me out with something. I should have paid more attention to the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. The way her voice went up at the end like she was trying to make it sound casual when it was anything but. Instead, I just smiled and took another sip of my lukewarm coffee, completely unaware that I was about to step into the middle of an emotional hurricane. The thing about Rachel is that she had this way of making everything sound like an adventure, even when it was clearly going to be complicated. She had been talking about this new guy, Marcus, for weeks. He'd moved to our city from Seattle about 2 months ago, taking a job at one of the tech startups that had been popping up all over our previously sleepy downtown. Every time she mentioned him, her whole face would light up like someone had flipped a switch inside her. I understood the appeal completely. Marcus had that effortlessly cool musician vibe, the kind of guy who could make a simple t-shirt and jeans look like high fashion. He played guitar in a local band on weekends, had these deep brown eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a smile that could probably melt steel. But here's where things got complicated and why Rachel needed my help. Marcus came as a package deal with his younger brother, Daniel, who had just turned 13. Their parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago, and Marcus, who was only 24 at the time, had stepped up to become Daniel's guardian. It was the kind of story that would make anyone's heart ache. This young man giving up his carefree 20s to raise his teenage brother. And from what Rachel had observed, Marcus took the responsibility seriously. Too seriously, maybe. Wherever Marcus went, Daniel was there too. Coffee shops, grocery stores, even the occasional happy hour with coworkers. Not because Marcus forced him to tag along, but because Daniel had developed some pretty intense separation anxiety since losing their parents. Rachel explained all of this to me in that booth, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement. She reached across the table and grabbed both of my hands, her eyes wide and pleading. Sarah, I just need someone to spend time with Daniel for a few hours here and there. Give Marcus and me a chance to actually have a conversation without his brother hovering nearby. You're so good with kids. Remember how amazing you were with your cousin's twins at the family reunion? This would be perfect. You could take Daniel to the arcade or the movies or something, and I could finally get to know Marcus as more than just the guy with the kid brother attached to his hip. I wanted to say no. Something in my gut was telling me this was a bad idea, that getting involved in this situation would lead to complications I couldn't even imagine. But Rachel had been there for me through everything. When I went through that horrible breakup with Tyler last year, she was the one who showed up at my door with ice cream and tissues. When I was terrified about starting my new job, she spent hours helping me prepare for the interview. When my dad had his heart surgery, she practically lived at the hospital with me. How could I say no to her now, when she was asking for something that seemed so simple? Babysitting a 13-year-old for a few hours? What could possibly go wrong? The first time I met Daniel was on a Saturday afternoon at their apartment. Rachel had arranged everything, telling Marcus that she had a friend who loved kids and wouldn't mind hanging out with Daniel while they went to check out this new art gallery that had opened downtown. I remember standing outside their door, taking a deep breath before knocking, trying to shake off the weird, nervous feeling in my stomach. When Marcus opened the door, I understood immediately why Rachel was so smitten. He had this presence about him, calm and confident, but also somehow vulnerable. His smile was warm but tired, like someone who had been carrying a heavy load for too long. Daniel was sitting on the couch in the living room, arms crossed, looking like a storm cloud in human form. He was smaller than I expected for 13, with the same dark hair as his brother, but none of the easy charm. When Marcus introduced us, Daniel barely looked up from his phone, mumbling something that might have been hello or might have been go away. I could see the frustration flash across Marcus's face before he covered it with another smile. He's having a rough day, Marcus explained quietly, while Daniel pretended not to hear. Some kids at school have been giving him a hard time. I promise he's usually more friendly than this. Rachel appeared from the kitchen, looking gorgeous in a sundress that I knew she'd bought specifically for this occasion. She gave me a quick hug and whispered thank you in my ear before practically dragging Marcus toward the door. I watched them leave, Marcus looking back twice to check on Daniel, who was now glaring at me like I was personally responsible for all the wrongs in his life. The door clicked shut, and suddenly it was just Daniel and me in an apartment that smelled like coffee and something baking in the oven. The silence stretched between us like a taut rubber band, ready to snap at any moment. I sat down on the opposite end of the couch, giving him plenty of space, and tried to think of something to say that wouldn't sound condescending or fake. Finally, I decided to just be honest. Look, I know this is weird for you. You don't know me, and you probably don't want some random stranger hanging out in your living room. But I promised Rachel I'd be here, so how about we make the best of it? What do you usually do on Saturdays? Daniel looked up from his phone for the first time, studying me with eyes that were too knowing for a 13-year-old. Nothing, he said flatly. Marcus usually drags me wherever he needs to go, and I sit there being invisible while people pretend I'm not cramping his style. The bitterness in his voice made my heart ache. No kid should sound that resigned to being unwanted. I thought about all the Saturdays I'd spent at that age, how important it had felt to have my own space, my own choices. Well, today you get to pick, I told him. We can stay here and do nothing, or we can go somewhere you actually want to go. No catch, no ulterior motive. Just two people killing time on a Saturday afternoon. He looked skeptical, but I saw something shift in his expression. Really? He asked, like he was testing me. Really, I confirmed. 20 minutes later, we were at the arcade in the mall, and I watched Daniel transform from sullen teenager to excited kid as he explained the different games to me. It turned out he was really into retro arcade games, the kind I'd grown up playing. We started with Pac-Man, moved on to Street Fighter, and by the time we got to the racing games, he was actually laughing at my terrible driving skills. I bought us both ridiculous amounts of tokens, and we spent the next 2 hours competing at everything from skee-ball to Dance Dance Revolution. What Daniel didn't know was that I had practically lived at the arcade near my house growing up. My older brother had worked there during high school, and I'd spent countless afternoons perfecting my skills at every game they had. So when Daniel challenged me to a Guitar Hero battle, confident that he could beat the old lady, as he jokingly called me, I couldn't help but grin. The look on his face when I absolutely destroyed him on expert mode was priceless. No way, he gasped, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. How are you so good at this? I shrugged, trying not to look too smug. I told you, I practically grew up in arcades. You're going to need a lot more practice before you can beat me, kid. Instead of getting upset, he laughed, a real genuine laugh that completely changed his face. You know what? You're actually pretty cool. Most adults who hang out with me are either trying too hard to be my friend or acting like I'm some kind of charity case. But you're normal. We grabbed pizza at the food court, and Daniel opened up more than I expected. He told me about school, about how weird it was to be the kid whose brother was his guardian, about how some of his classmates thought he was making it up for attention. He talked about missing his parents, but feeling guilty whenever he brought them up because it made Marcus sad. He mentioned how all the girls at school suddenly wanted to be his friend once they saw Marcus, but none of them actually cared about him as a person. The Rachel type, he said, and I felt a twist of guilt in my stomach. Like your friend. She looks at Marcus like he's some kind of prize to win, and she looks at me like I'm an obstacle in her way. I wanted to defend Rachel, to explain that she wasn't really like that, but the words wouldn't come. Because wasn't that exactly what was happening? Wasn't I here specifically to be the obstacle remover? Instead, I focused on Daniel, on making him feel heard. That must be really frustrating, I said. Feeling like people only see you in relation to your brother, not as your own person. He nodded, picking at his pizza crust. Marcus tries to include me in everything because he feels guilty about our parents, about having to be my guardian instead of just my brother. But sometimes I wish he'd just live his life and let me figure out mine. I'm 13, not 3. By the time we headed back to the apartment, something had shifted between us. Daniel was chattering about school, his favorite video games, the comic book series he was reading. He even asked if I'd want to hang out again sometime, which made me feel both happy and guilty. When we walked in, Marcus and Rachel were sitting on the couch, a careful distance between them that suggested their afternoon hadn't gone quite as Rachel had hoped. Marcus jumped up when he saw us, his face lighting up with relief. How did it go? Did you have fun? Daniel actually smiled at his brother, a real smile without any of the earlier resentment. Sarah's actually cool, he announced. We went to the arcade and she completely destroyed me at Guitar Hero. It was awesome. I caught Marcus looking at me with surprise and something else I couldn't quite identify. Rachel was smiling too, but it looked forced, like she was playing a part in a show she no longer wanted to be in. After that first afternoon, things developed a pattern I hadn't expected. Rachel would arrange for me to spend time with Daniel, usually on Saturday afternoons, so she could have alone time with Marcus. But something strange started happening. Marcus would show up at wherever Daniel and I were, claiming he just wanted to check in, and then he'd end up staying. The three of us would find ourselves at the arcade or the mini golf place, or getting ice cream, and what was supposed to be babysitting turned into something that felt suspiciously like hanging out. Daniel noticed it too. One afternoon, while we were waiting for our turn at the go-kart track, he looked up at me with those two wise eyes and said, "Marcus likes you." I nearly choked on my soda. What? No, Daniel, your brother is dating Rachel. Remember? That's the whole reason I'm here. Daniel shrugged, unbothered by my discomfort. I'm 13, not blind. He looks at you the way he used to look at his guitars before Mom and Dad died. Like you're something special he discovered. And you get all weird and blushy whenever he's around. It's kind of gross, actually. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off as teenage imagination, but the words stuck in my throat. Because the truth was, I had started noticing things about Marcus that I had no business noticing. The way he always remembered how I liked my coffee. How he'd unconsciously lean toward me when we were talking. The way his eyes would find mine across a crowded arcade. And we'd share these moments of understanding about Daniel's latest antics. I told myself it was just friendship. Just two adults bonding over caring for a teenager. But late at night when I couldn't sleep, I knew I was lying to myself. The situation became even more complicated when we developed our Thursday night tradition. It had started innocently enough. Daniel had a big test on Friday and needed help studying. Rachel was working late, so Marcus asked if I could come over and help. We ordered Chinese food, spread textbooks across the dining room table, and spent 3 hours going over American history. When Daniel finally understood the concept he'd been struggling with, his face lit up with pride. And Marcus and I exchanged these ridiculously proud parent looks that made my chest tight. After that, Thursday nights became our thing. I'd show up around 6, we'd have dinner together, and then I'd help Daniel with homework while Marcus cleaned up or worked on his own projects. Once Daniel finished his work, we'd all watch a movie together, with Daniel inevitably falling asleep halfway through, his head on my shoulder. Marcus would carry him to bed, and then we'd sit on the couch talking quietly about everything and nothing until it got too late and I had to go home. Those Thursday nights were dangerous because they felt so natural, so right. It was too easy to forget that this wasn't my family, that Marcus wasn't my boyfriend, that I was there because my best friend had asked me to babysit. Rachel would text sometimes during those evenings, asking how things were going, and I'd feel this wave of guilt so strong it made me nauseous. "Everything's fine," I'd text back, hating myself for all the things I wasn't saying. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in early November. Daniel was curled up between us on the couch, already half asleep, despite insisting he wasn't tired. We were watching some superhero movie he'd picked, the kind where everything explodes every 5 minutes. I was hyper-aware of Marcus on the other side of Daniel, of the way the light from the TV played across his face, of how carefully he was not looking at me. Then Daniel shifted, mumbling something about being cold, and Marcus reached for the blanket at the same time I did. Our hands touched, and it was like electricity shot through my entire body. We both froze, staring at each other over Daniel's head, and in that moment, every pretense fell away. I could see it all in his eyes, the same confusion and guilt and want that was probably written all over my face. Daniel chose that moment to sit up, rubbing his eyes and looking between us with a frown. "You guys are being weird," he announced. "I'm going to bed." He stumbled off toward his room, leaving Marcus and me alone on the couch with this massive, unspoken thing between us. "I should go," I said, already standing up, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Marcus stood too, running his hand through his hair in that way he did when he was stressed. "Sarah, wait. Can we talk about—" He trailed off, gesturing helplessly between us. I shook my head, grabbing my purse and heading for the door. "There's nothing to talk about." "You're with Rachel. She's my best friend. This is nothing." Even as I said it, we both knew I was lying. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few weeks. How had I let this happen? How had I gone from helping my best friend to developing feelings for the guy she was crazy about? I thought about Daniel, about how he'd started to trust me, to depend on our time together. I thought about Marcus, about the way he smiled when he watched Daniel and me joking around, about the quiet conversations we'd had about loss and responsibility and trying to do the right thing. And I thought about Rachel, my best friend who had no idea that I was betraying her in the worst possible way. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "I'm sorry about last night. Can we please talk?" I stared at it for 20 minutes before responding. "I think we need to take a step back. I'll still hang out with Daniel, but you should focus on your relationship with Rachel." His response came quickly. "What relationship with Rachel?" "Sarah, I need to tell you something." Before I could process what that meant, my phone rang. It was Rachel, and she was crying. I knew something was wrong the moment she said my name, her voice thick with tears. "Can you come over?" Marcus he broke things off. He said he doesn't see me that way, that he values my friendship but doesn't want to date me. "Sarah, I don't understand what I did wrong. I was so sure we were getting closer." I felt like the world's worst person as I told her I'd be right there. I threw on clothes and drove to her apartment, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When she opened the door, her face was puffy and red, and she immediately collapsed into my arms. I held her while she cried, making soothing noises and hating myself more with every passing second. We sat on her couch while she went through the whole conversation with Marcus, how he'd been so gentle but firm, how he'd said she was amazing but he just didn't feel that spark. "I think there's someone else," she said finally, wiping her eyes with the tissue. The way he talked, it was like he was trying not to hurt my feelings, but I could tell. There's someone else he's interested in. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Maybe he's just not ready for a relationship. You said he's got a lot on his plate with Daniel." Rachel shook her head. "No, it's not that. Sarah, what if it's someone from his work? What if he's been seeing someone this whole time and I was just too stupid to notice?" I held my best friend while she cried over a guy who, if I was honest with myself, I was falling for. I made her tea and listened to her analyze every interaction she'd had with Marcus, looking for signs she'd missed. I agreed when she said she needed some time to get over him before seeing him again. And through it all, I said nothing about Thursday nights on the couch, about shared looks over Daniel's homework, about the way my heart raced whenever Marcus smiled at me. That weekend, I knew I needed to put some distance between Marcus and myself. When he texted asking if I was coming over for our usual Thursday night, I made up an excuse about having to work late. When Daniel texted asking when we were going to the arcade again, I told him I had family stuff for the next few weeks. It killed me to lie to him, but I couldn't figure out any other way to handle the situation without hurting everyone involved. But Marcus wasn't willing to let it go that easily. He showed up at my office building on Tuesday afternoon, standing by the security desk in the lobby, looking determined and miserable at the same time. The security guard looked at me expectantly, and I had no choice but to sign Marcus in and find somewhere private to talk. We ended up in the empty conference room on my floor, facing each other across a corporate table that felt like an ocean between us. "Sarah, I ended things with Rachel because it wasn't fair to her. I don't have feelings for her, and I never did. I tried, I really did, because she's nice and Daniel seemed to like the stability of having people around, but I can't fake something that isn't there." He paused, running that hand through his hair again. "The truth is, I started having feelings for someone else. Someone who made me remember what it felt like to want something for myself, not just for Daniel." I knew what he was going to say before he said it, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. "You can't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, you can't have feelings for me. Rachel is my best friend. She's devastated right now. If she found out..." I couldn't even finish the sentence. The thought of Rachel discovering that I'd betrayed her was unbearable. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just being honest. Don't you think we owe each other that? These past few weeks with you and Daniel, they've been the happiest I've been since my parents died. You make him laugh in a way I haven't seen in years. And you make me feel like maybe I can have a life beyond just being his guardian. I'm not saying we have to act on anything, but can we at least acknowledge that there's something here?" I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was imagining things, but I couldn't lie to his face. Not when he was looking at me like that, like I was something precious he was afraid of losing. "Yes, there's something here," I admitted, feeling tears prick my eyes. But that doesn't mean we can act on it. Some things are more important than what we want, like friendship, like Daniel's stability, like doing the right thing even when it's hard. We sat in that conference room for another hour, talking in circles, neither of us willing to completely let go, but both knowing we couldn't move forward. Finally, Marcus stood up, looking defeated. I respect your decision, but Sarah, I need you to know that this isn't just some passing thing for me. I'll wait if that's what you need. I'll wait until you're ready, or until you tell me to stop waiting. Just don't disappear from Daniel's life. He needs you, even if you can't be there for me. After he left, I sat in that empty conference room and cried. I cried for Rachel, who deserved a best friend who wouldn't develop feelings for her crush. I cried for Daniel, who just wanted stability and people who wouldn't abandon him. I cried for Marcus, who was trying so hard to do right by everyone. And I cried for myself, for the mess I'd made of everything by not being honest from the beginning. The next few weeks were torture. I went back to spending time with Daniel, but I made sure Marcus wasn't around when I did. I'd pick Daniel up from school and take him to the arcade or the library, then drop him off at home before Marcus got back from work. Daniel noticed the change immediately. "Why are you being weird?" he asked one afternoon while we were at the comic book store. "Did you and Marcus have a fight? Is this about Rachel?" Because she hasn't been around either, and Marcus just says they decided to be friends. I tried to keep my voice light. "No fight. I just thought it would be good for us to have our own time. You know, without your brother hovering." Daniel gave me that look that meant he wasn't buying it for a second. This is stupid. You like him, he likes you. Rachel was never going to work out anyway because she didn't actually care about getting to know us. She just thought Marcus was hot. Why are adults so complicated? Out of the mouths of babes, right? But it wasn't that simple, and I told Daniel as much. Sometimes caring about people means making hard choices. Rachel is my best friend, and she's hurting right now. I can't just start dating your brother while she's still getting over him. That would be cruel. Daniel considered this, then shrugged. I guess, but it's still stupid. You make Marcus happy and he never smiles anymore. And I miss our Thursday nights. Mom used to say that life's too short to not be with the people who make you happy. His words haunted me for days. I thought about his parents, about how they died so suddenly, leaving their sons to figure out life without them. I thought about how Marcus had given up so much to take care of Daniel, how he'd put his own life on hold. Was I really doing the right thing by staying away? Or was I just being a coward, hiding behind noble intentions to avoid dealing with the complicated reality of the situation? 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Rachel called me. She sounded different, lighter somehow. "Hey, stranger," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I know I've been MIA lately, but I've been doing some thinking. Can we meet for coffee? I want to talk to you about something." We met at our usual diner, and I was shocked to see how good she looked. The puffy-eyed, heartbroken Rachel from a few weeks ago had been replaced by someone who looked peaceful. She started talking before I even sat down. "Sarah, I need to apologize. I've been so wrapped up in my own drama that I haven't been a good friend to you. The truth is, I've been thinking about the whole Marcus thing, and I realized something. I was never really interested in him as a person. I was interested in the idea of him, you know? The hot single guardian, the musician, the tragic backstory. It was like I was casting him in this romantic movie in my head without actually getting to know who he really is." I stared at her, not sure where this was going. "Rachel, you don't need to apologize. You liked a guy, it didn't work out. That's not a crime." She shook her head, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "No, but using you to get to him wasn't fair. And honestly, I think I knew pretty early on that there was something between you two. The way he'd light up when talking about your Thursday nights, how Daniel would go on and on about how cool you were. I just didn't want to see it. My heart was pounding. Rachel, nothing happened. I would never." She held up her hand, stopping me. "I know you wouldn't. That's what makes this so hard. Sarah, I've been seeing someone, a guy from my pottery class. His name is James, and he's nothing like Marcus. He's an accountant, for crying out loud. Wears these ridiculous sweater vests and makes the worst dad jokes. But he makes me laugh, and he actually wants to know about my day. And when I'm with him, I don't feel like I'm performing. I just feel like myself." She reached across the table and took my hand. What I'm trying to say is, I'm okay. More than okay, actually. And I think you should talk to Marcus. Really talk to him, because life's too short to miss out on something real because of misplaced guilt. I've seen how you are with him and Daniel. You fit with them in a way I never did. And you deserve to be happy, Sarah. We both do. I cried right there in the diner. Ugly crying while Rachel handed me napkins and the waitress pretended not to notice. Are you sure? I asked when I could finally speak again. Because Rachel, your friendship means everything to me. I don't want to lose you over some guy. She squeezed my hand tighter. You're not going to lose me. But you might lose him if you wait too long. And Sarah? He's not just some guy, we both know that. That night, I called Marcus. My hands were shaking as I dialed, and when he answered on the second ring, his voice careful and hopeful, I nearly lost my nerve. Can we talk? I asked in person. There was a pause, and then he said, Daniel's at a sleepover tonight. Can you come over? The apartment felt different without Daniel there, quieter and somehow more intimate. Marcus made coffee while I sat on the couch where we'd spent so many Thursday nights, trying to figure out what to say. When he handed me my mug, prepared exactly how I liked it, I noticed his hands were shaking too. I talked to Rachel today, I started, and watched him tense. She's seeing someone new, a guy from her pottery class. She seems really happy. And she told me I should talk to you. Really talk to you. Marcus sat down next to me, not touching but close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. And what do you want to say? I took a deep breath, gathering all my courage. I want to say that these past few months have been confusing and complicated and wonderful. I want to say that I care about Daniel like he's my own family. I want to say that Thursday nights are my favorite part of the week. And I want to say that I've been falling for you since that first day at the arcade when you stayed to make sure Daniel was having fun even though you were supposed to be on a date with my best friend. Marcus set his coffee down and turned to face me fully. I never meant for this to happen, he said quietly. When Rachel suggested you spend time with Daniel, I thought it would be good for him to have someone else in his life. I never expected this. You fit into our lives like you've always been there. Daniel adores you, really adores you. Not just because you're cool or you buy him pizza. You see him, the real him, and you make him feel valued. And you make me remember that I'm more than just a guardian. You make me feel like Marcus again. We talked for hours that night, about everything we'd been holding back, about the guilt and the fear and the hope, about how to move forward in a way that honored everyone's feelings, about what it would mean for Daniel if we tried and it didn't work out. By the time the sun was coming up, we'd made a decision. We would take things slow, incredibly slow. We'd tell Daniel first, make sure he understood that no matter what happened between Marcus and me, my relationship with him was separate and permanent. We'd be honest with everyone, including Rachel, from the very beginning. And we'd see where it went, one careful step at a time. The conversation with Daniel went better than I could have hoped. When we sat him down the next evening, he listened to our careful explanation with an increasingly exasperated expression. Finally, he burst out, "Oh my God, finally. Do you know how painful it's been watching you two dance around each other? It's like the world's most boring romantic comedy. Does this mean we can go back to regular Thursday nights? Because trying to do homework alone sucks." We both laughed, the tension breaking like a snapped rubber band. Marcus reached over and ruffled Daniel's hair. "This changes things, buddy. Sarah and I dating means the dynamics are different. Are you sure you're okay with that?" Daniel rolled his eyes in that way only teenagers can manage. "Marcus, I've been shipping you two since the second arcade trip. Just don't be gross and make out in front of me, and we're cool. Oh, and Sarah, if you break his heart, I'm keeping the high score on all the arcade games, just so you know." Our first official date was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Marcus got a babysitter for Daniel. An actual babysitter this time. A college kid from down the street who Daniel actually thought was cool. We went to dinner at this little Italian place across town, the kind with candles on the tables and a violin player who wandered between the diners. It should have felt awkward after all the build-up, but instead it felt like coming home. We talked about things we'd never discussed during our Thursday nights. Deeper things about our dreams and fears and what we wanted from life. Marcus told me about the music he used to write before his parents died, how he'd been thinking about starting again. I told him about my complicated relationship with my mother, how I'd always felt like I was disappointing her by not following the path she'd laid out for me. We held hands across the table like teenagers, and when he drove me home and walked me to my door, the kiss we shared was worth every moment of confusion and guilt that had led us there. The next few months fell into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Thursday nights remained sacred Daniel-Sarah time, though now Marcus would join us for the movie portion without any pretense. Saturdays became date nights when we could manage it, and Sundays were family days where all three of us would do something together. Daniel thrived with the stability and the explicit confirmation that he was important to both of us individually and as a unit. Rachel and James became a regular part of our extended circle. The first time we all had dinner together was surreal, but Rachel handled it with such grace that any awkwardness quickly faded. She and James were genuinely good together in a way that Marcus and she never would have been. Watching them laugh at each other's jokes and share those little touches that new couples do, I felt the last of my guilt dissolve. There were challenges, of course. Dating someone who's also a guardian to a teenager isn't simple. Plans got canceled when Daniel had a crisis at school or needed extra support. There were times when Marcus was so exhausted from balancing work and parenting that he could barely keep his eyes open during our dates. There were moments when I felt like an outsider looking in at their established family unit, unsure where I fit. But for every challenge, there were a dozen moments that made it worthwhile. Like when Daniel started introducing me as my Sarah to his friends, the pride in his voice making my heart swell. Like when Marcus wrote me a song for my birthday, playing it quietly in his living room while Daniel filmed on his phone, insisting we needed to document the moment. Like the Saturday morning when I let myself into their apartment to find them both passed out on the couch, an empty pizza box on the coffee table, and some superhero movie still playing, and I realized that somewhere along the way, this had become home. 6 months after our first official date, I was practically living at their apartment anyway, so when Marcus suggested I make it official and move in, it felt like a natural next step. Daniel's response was typically Daniel. "Does this mean you'll be here to make breakfast? Because Marcus burns everything, and I'm tired of eating cereal." The move was surprisingly easy, like the universe had just been waiting for us to catch up to where we were supposed to be. Life settled into a new normal that felt anything but normal in the best way possible. Mornings became a choreographed chaos of getting everyone ready for school and work, arguing over who used the last of the milk, and Daniel trying to convince us that video games counted as educational screen time. Evenings were homework and dinner and family time, with Marcus and I tag teaming based on who had the energy to help with algebra and who was better equipped to handle teenage mood swings. The Thursday night tradition evolved but never ended. It became our check-in time, when Daniel and I would have one-on-one conversations about whatever was going on in his life while Marcus gave us space. Sometimes we'd still go to the arcade, but more often we'd just hang out at home, talking while playing video games or working on whatever project he was obsessed with that week. On one of those Thursday nights, about a year after I'd moved in, Daniel brought up something that had clearly been on his mind. "So, are you guys going to get married? Because if you are, I have some thoughts about the wedding. Specifically, I don't want to wear a suit and I better be the best man. Also, no weird theme. Jamie's mom just got remarried and they had a medieval theme and everyone had to dress up. It was traumatic. I nearly choked on my popcorn while Daniel looked at me expectantly. Marcus and I hadn't really talked about marriage yet. Both of us focused on making sure our blended family worked before taking any bigger steps. But Daniel's casual assumption that we would, that it was a when, not an if, made something warm bloom in my chest. "We haven't really discussed it yet," I told him honestly. "But if and when we do, you'll be the first to know. And I promise no medieval theme." Daniel nodded, satisfied with that answer, and went back to destroying me at Mario Kart. But later that night, after he'd gone to bed, Marcus pulled me out onto the tiny balcony off the living room. The city lights spread out below us, and I could hear the distant sound of traffic and life happening all around us. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood there in comfortable silence for a while. "Daniel asked me earlier if I was going to propose to you," he said finally, his voice soft against my ear. "Told me I was an idiot if I didn't lock it down soon because you're clearly the best thing that ever happened to us." I laughed, leaning back into his warmth. That kid is too smart for his own good. "What did you tell him?" "I told him he was right," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That you are the best thing that happened to us. That you took two broken people trying to figure out how to be a family and showed us what it could really look like. That I wake up every day grateful that Rachel asked you to babysit, even though it didn't turn out like anyone expected." He turned me around to face him, and I could see the nervousness in his eyes despite the dim light. I know we've been taking everything slow, making sure we do right by Daniel and everyone else. But Sarah, I don't want to wait anymore. I don't have a ring or a big speech planned, but I love you. I love the life we've built together. I love the way you've become Daniel's person and my partner and the heart of our little family. Will you marry me? Even without the ring or the perfect setting or any of the traditional trappings, it was perfect because it was us. Real and honest and slightly messy, just like everything else in our life together. Yes, I whispered, and kissed him while the city sparkled around us. We told Daniel the next morning over breakfast, and his reaction was everything I could have hoped for. He jumped up from this table, knocking over his orange juice in the process, and hugged us both so tight I could barely breathe. Finally, do you know how long I've been waiting for this? I already have a whole Pinterest board for wedding ideas. Just kidding, that's weird. But seriously, this is the best news ever. We're going to be an actual official family. And he was right. We were going to be an official family, though in every way that mattered, we already were. Looking back at how it all started, with Rachel's simple request in that diner, I never could have imagined it would lead here. Life has a funny way of taking you exactly where you need to be, even when the path is winding and complicated and full of unexpected turns. We got married the following spring in a small ceremony in Marcus's parents' backyard, the same house where he and Daniel had grown up. It felt right having it there, like their parents were part of it somehow. Daniel was indeed the best man, looking impossibly grown up in his actually not too bad suit that he'd picked out himself. Rachel stood as my maid of honor, radiant in her dress and genuinely happy for us. She and James had gotten engaged a month before us, and we joked about our intertwined love stories, how my babysitting gig had led to both of us finding our person. As I stood there exchanging vows with Marcus, with Daniel standing between us trying not to cry, I thought about all the moments that had led us here. The awkward first meeting, the arcade battles, the Thursday night traditions, the guilt and confusion, and eventual clarity. Every step had been necessary. Every complication had taught us something important about ourselves and each other. Life after the wedding settled into a new rhythm that was both familiar and different. The three of us hyphenated our last names, becoming our own little unit within the larger world. Daniel started high school with more confidence than he'd had in years, secure in the knowledge that his family was solid and permanent. Marcus started writing music again, inspired by the stability and happiness we'd found together. And I found myself exactly where I'd never expected to be but couldn't imagine being anywhere else. We still have our challenges. Raising a teenager is never simple, and doing it as a blended family adds extra layers of complexity. There are days when Daniel pushes boundaries, testing to make sure we're really as permanent as we promised. There are times when Marcus and I have to navigate the tricky balance between being partners and co-parents and individuals with our own needs. There are moments when I miss the simplicity of my old life before I became responsible for other people's hearts and histories and hopes, but for every difficult moment, there are 100 beautiful ones. Like Saturday mornings when we all pile into the kitchen to make pancakes, and Daniel and Marcus have a competition to see who can flip theirs highest without hitting the ceiling. Like the quiet Sunday afternoons when we're all in the living room, doing our own things but together. The comfortable silence of a family that doesn't need words to feel connected. Like the Thursday nights that remain sacred when Daniel and I check in with each other. And I get to watch him grow into the amazing young man he's becoming. Sometimes I think about that moment in the diner when Rachel asked me to help her out with something. How different my life would be if I'd said no. If I'd listened to that instinct that told me it would get complicated. I would have missed out on all of this messy, beautiful, complicated love. I would have missed out on becoming part of something bigger than myself. On learning that family isn't just about blood, but about choosing each other every single day. The other day, Daniel asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. Do you think Mom and Dad would have liked you? He asked, looking at the photo of his parents that sits on our mantle. It was one of those moments that reminded me of the weight of what we'd all taken on. The ghost that would always be part of our family story. I think they would be happy that you and Marcus have someone who loves you both so much, I told him honestly. And I hope they'd trust me to help take care of you both. To be part of keeping their memory alive while also helping you build new memories. Daniel nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. I think they would have loved you, he said quietly. You make us happy. You make us a family again. Not the same family we were, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's even better because we chose it. And isn't that the truth of it all? We chose each other, over and over, through all the complications and confusion. We chose to build something new from the broken pieces of what came before. We chose love over fear, honesty over comfort, and complexity over simplicity. And in the end, those choices led us exactly where we needed to be. Together, imperfect and real, and home.